Hi everyone, welcome to week 7. This week we're going to be thinking with feminist theoretical perspectives and how they come to matter in early childhood education. So we're going to be reading an article by Mindy Blaze called Interfering with Gendered Development, a Timely Intervention. And we're also going to be reading an article by phenomenologist Sarah Ahmed, and the title is Multiculturalism and the Promise of Happiness. So this week, your tasks are to watch a short video clip that's posted on eLearn by Sarah Ahmed. You're going to watch a short video clip from the movie Bend It Like Beckham, and you're going to watch this in relation with the Sarah Ahmed article. You'll also be watching Group 5's chapter discussion. You'll be reading a short microblog. It's about 1 paragraph long by Africa Taylor on queering the home center in early childhood spaces. And you'll also be watching this week's 7-chapter lecture series. And then you'll also be posting finally your response in the provocation forum by Wednesday at 11:55 p.m. So this week, we're going to be thinking about what it means to ask a feminist question. And I want to highlight that this work is as important as it is hard. And if it's not hard, if it's not difficult or uncomfortable, then that means that we're not asking the right questions. Feminist questions are intended to notice and question why it is that we do the things that we do, and to sort of unsettle dominant normative assumptions about how we think things are to be within the status quo. So making visible inequities and power relations that exist within normative ideologies. So Sarah Ahmed writes that feminist consciousness can be thought of as consciousness of the violence and power concealed under the languages of civility, happiness, and love, rather than simply or only consciousness of gender as a site of restriction of possibility. You can venture into secret places of pain by recalling something. You can cause unhappiness by noticing something. And if you can cause unhappiness by noticing something, you realize that the world you are in is not the world you thought you were in. So in this week's article, Sarah Ahmed discusses language and concepts as world-making phenomena, and she discusses this in her video as well. That words are a part of a lineage of philosophical thought and theory, so language really matters. Language often becomes so normalized that we may not notice what it actually tells and the histories it carries along with it. So reconceptualist, post-structural theory, and feminist theories highlight that language is not only communicative, but language creates worlds and how we come to know and understand ourselves within them. So, for example, languages that contribute to the construction of the autonomous developing child. If we're using language in early childhood, such as 1, 2, 3 magic, or self-regulation strategies, such as the zones of regulation that are becoming very popular. If we organize children's groupings according to age, stage, or gender, we're carrying with us discourses of developmentalism and behavioral conditioning forward. So these languages frame how we make sense of the world, how we see children, and how we understand the construction of knowledge. So these phrases and these languages are loaded with theoretical orientations and an understanding of how we see children. So early childhood education is full of these phrases. Others include like children are sponges, or children are free, children are innocent, vulnerable. We often paint children as romantically closer to nature. These discourses construct childhood as a distinct time in human life that is somehow separate from social and political influence. So here, the promise of purity lies both outside in the naturally undiscovered terrain that's romantic in nature, and also inside the body of the innocent child whose youth in some ways promises a future of progress and production. So, as our texts argue, this is a westernized view of childhood that remains tied to a white, middle-class human and radically excludes others. So, most childhoods in the world do not actually look like this. We can see this at play in discourses surrounding children's labor. Children's real participation in society is often moralized and tensioned amid Western discourses of happy, free childhoods hidden from the political and worldly realities. So the image of the happy, bubble-wrapped child or the innocent child getting dirty or touched by pristine nature is part of complex and dynamic neocolonial formations that continue to reduce geopolitically incommensurable childhoods into colonial imaginaries under a transcendental image of this innocent, pure child bounded from the poisons of the world. So this is a feminist look at some of the dominant ideas and languages that are surrounding childhood. And some of these discourses have been bubbling up in the forums. And I just want us to remain cautious and attentive to where it is that they actually come from. So these discourses of purity and innocence function to not only neutralize gendered and racialized childhoods into homogeneous framings, but they also radically exclude children from the contradictory, messy ecological milieu in which they are actually situated and already implicated in. So these languages of innocence and pedagogies that serve children's happiness and freedom, as we discussed last week and the week before, come from somewhere. They're full of gendered and racial tensions. So these languages become part of institutionalized discourse that creates what education does, how it performs in social discourse to uphold an image of the child that functions well within societies that prize whiteness, heterosexuality, nuclear family life, and as Ahmed tells us this week, a promise of happiness. So this promise of happiness is very alive in education, particularly in early childhood education. The happy child is one who is able to participate and live well in whiteness and all that comes close to its ordinary form. And as we'll discuss in later weeks, this construction of the human is attached to a projection of white colonial masculinity that predicates who one can be and become in society. So it's in the service of the productive individual who contributes to capitalist patriarchal society. And in the microblog offered by Africa Taylor this week, she asks us, what would the architectures of the home corner look like if designed to accommodate all manner of refugees, dispossessed, and displaced beings instead of nuclear families? What kinds of recuperative queer kin rituals, practices, and relations would emerge in this purposefully reconfigured collective space? So she's challenging us as early childhood scholars and educators to queer the home corner, this station that's very common in early childhood spaces for dress up and things like that, and sort of like imaginative play. And so here she's working with queer theory to trouble a common assumption about how we assume things have always been done in early childhood spaces. So there's a very pedagogical nature to these theoretical assumptions. So here she's offering a queer eye as a means of noticing, questioning, and responding to discourses which uphold oppressive narratives and create spaces toward more possible storylines and symbols in early childhood in ways which multiple ways of being and orienting to the world might become possible. So she calls on us to reimagine home corner anew, beyond the standard design and play that reproduce heteronormative domestic relations. So this statement is very much echoed in some of the concepts that are taken up by Sarah Ahmed in her article this week that really problematize multiculturalism as a symbol of happy domestic Western life that actually renders invisible racialized and gendered issues that are here as well. And we'll talk about this more in a moment. So in this sense, the home corner or the home dress-up station is very much a symbol in early childhood of this white, happy, heterosexual social construction of family life and of the human. So the space and objects within it propose particular ways of moving and relating with others. These objects do something. They create emotions, and these emotions are situated within dominant discourse. So there's an atmosphere within the home corner that alludes to a certain way of life and being, an ideal image of happiness and how it ought to be lived. So Ahmed describes how such spaces and objects are associated with particular ideas of happiness and normalcy, and they produce effects for those who encounter them. And these effects are differential depending on your social positionality. And so some of you may have encountered these readings and this micro blog by Africa Taylor in the inclusion course 159. But in this course, we're going to be taking these same ideas and thinking more about their theoretical groundings. What are the theories that are informing these ideas? So Sarah Ahmed, from a feminist theoretical perspective, discusses happiness from a critical feminist lens. And so in this article, she's looking at the social construction of happiness as directly linked to loyalty of the national ideal. So for example, heterosexual marriage, traditional gender roles, the white middle class nuclear family. So she's problematizing common images of the happy multicultural state that's very common here in Canada, or this notion of happy diversity as a program of thought that funnels ethnic and cultural diversity and difference into a common and seemingly neutral frame. So in order to fit within dominant images of the happy multicultural community, people must integrate themselves into pre-existing Euro-Western imaginaries.